Hello and welcome to WFL Breakdowns, where I go through some more complicated rules and things of that nature in our WFL rulebook. Some things I cover kind of briskly in the rulebook series. I'll break stuff down a little bit more in detail and hopefully help you understand our reasoning and the concepts behind why we do what we do. I am the commissioner and one of the coaches, Winuvas, and I will be breaking down today our waiver wire process. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pull up Chrome to show you our rulebook set here, and this is the example I'm pulling from section 4 of our rulebook. If you need a link to it, it'll be provided in the description. You can also find it in our video rulebook series, the description of it. You can see right there, a waiver wire claim form must be filled for any 68 or higher overall player. And by the way, we are using Neon Sports. If you're not familiar with it, it's a pretty solid website similar to Daddy Leagues if you're familiar with Daddy Leagues. And this is a list of free agents in my test franchise. This is not the official franchise, so bear that in mind. I'm showing you a test franchise we're doing to kind of play around with the Neon Sports website and some concepts and some things it does and make sure everything works as well as it can to make sure you guys have a smooth process. But anyway, you can see we have a list of free agents. This is a listing of free agents, and I have not really lowered anything as far as seeing what overalls. This is just a big old long list, and I'm just going to use them as an example. I'm going to use Richie James Jr. That's the guy I'm going to use here. He's 73 overall. So by our rules, he does have to have a waiver claim form filled out for him. So what I do here is click on this link to open this form. Now, just to save a little bit of time, I already have it open right here. Let me make sure I'm showing that. I am. Good deal. And the first thing you have to answer is the player 68 or higher or 67 or lower? And if you answer 67 or lower and you hit next, you will get prompted with a request denial. Essentially, anyone that is 67 overall or lower in the game, you can sign for nothing. Essentially, you don't have to put any claim process. The only exception to that is going to be a practice squad player. Practice squad players I'll cover here in just a little bit, but just to let you know, for any player that is a free agent, not a practice squad player, that is 67 or lower overall, you do not need to fill out this form at all. You simply sign into the game, sign the player, and it is on a first come, first serve basis. So if somebody beats you to the punch, sorry, they just beat you to the punch. Okay? So going back, we're going to change this, and we're going to go to 68 overall or above. So that means this player will qualify for the waiver claim form spot. And what we'll do is we submit a claim. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to choose my team. I am the Saints in this franchise. Player position. Be very careful about this and make sure that you pick the right player. So this is a wide receiver. Let me double check myself to make sure I see. Yep, Richie James Jr. is a wide receiver. So he's a wide receiver tight end. Player name. This is going to be important. You have to at least come very close to the player's spelling of the name, because we will use that to look at the player and compare waivers. And when we compare those waivers, we're going to be looking for the same name. And if the name looks kind of off, we may inadvertently give a claim to someone that may have not deserved it because you spelled the name wrong. So be sure you spell the name right. If you have to, you can try a copy and paste situation, but just double check and make sure. And if there's a excuse me, if there's a junior or a senior tag on it, be sure you put that on it as well, because it will be something we look for in the game. So Richie James Jr., are you offering a spot on the 53-man roster or the practice squad? Now this part here, that's fine. As this part here is, if you decide to offer a 53-man roster spot, that is considered a higher priority than if you offer a practice squad. So for example, if I were to offer Richie James Jr., which I'm not even sure if he would classify as a practice squad player, but for this example, let's say he does. If I offered him a spot on the practice squad and another team offered him a spot on the 53-man roster, the 53-man roster spot would take precedence no matter the waiver order over someone who's putting him on the practice squad. So essentially, if you try to put a guy on the practice squad and somebody tries to sign the same player to the 53-man roster, the player who is offering a 53-man roster spot will take priority no matter where they are in the waiver order. Now, for this player, I'm going to go 53-man roster. And right here it says amount offered. For this, you can put down just a number. This will probably be deleted off the original form because this form that we're using is a copy of one that's pulled from another league. And we will not be using bonuses and cash to determine waiver order. We will be using, and I'm just going to put in a number. I'm going to put 1 million just to satisfy it. But this question will not be on the final waiver form that you guys see. Just to let you know, basically, once you complete the 53-man roster or practice squad, you will submit, and your response will have been recorded. Now, to show you what we will look at on the back end, so you're going to kind of get a peek behind the curtain of WFL administration. What we'll do is this is what we'll be doing. Oh, wrong place. Nope, don't need to see that. Let's see WFL documents, forms. Let's see, waiver claim form. There we go. In fact, actually, whenever you guys, so this right here is going to be a deleted question. So we're gonna trash that question. Boom, go away. There we go. All right, and we're gonna look at responses. Now, this is something that our roster guru or myself, one of us will go through, and we will look at a spreadsheet. And essentially, what we will do is we will go by timestamp. Anywhere between 12 and 24 hours. Usually we'll try and go at least 24 hours to give us time to compile the waiver order for the week. The way we will compile waiver order is we will take and we will organize teams by their win-loss record. The less wins you have, the higher you are on the waiver claim. So for example, if we've played 6 weeks and you're 0-6, you're more than likely going to be number 1, if not number 2 on that waiver claim list. If you are 6-0, you will more than likely be 32nd on that claims list. And it will adjust on a week-to-week basis. That's why it's going to be a little bit of a gap between the time you submit a claim, we accept all those claims, and then we process them and pull them out. Because our roster guru and myself will have to hand do each week the waiver list. It's not currently on here. But essentially, there will be another tab on this sheet that you guys obviously won't see. I'm showing you this behind the camera a little bit just so you can kind of get an idea of what we are going to be going through. But essentially, we're going to look and we're going to see that Richie James Jr. has got a claim from the Saints, and it's a 53-man roster spot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to submit another response so you guys can see what we're going to be looking at. So I'm going to submit for the same player but for a different team. Now, obviously, I'm not that team in real life, but just kind of work with me here. Wide receiver, tight end, Richie James Jr. Now, he may not be a practice squad player, but for the purposes of this demonstration, I want to show off what we're going to be looking at. So practice squad and submit, and that waiver. So now we can refresh, and now you can see we have 2 claims, one from the Saints and one from the Browns from Richie James Jr. One of them is for a 53-man roster spot. You can ignore this. In fact, I'm going to just delete that column because it's not going to show up anymore. 53-man roster practice squad. So in this case, even if the Browns had a terrible record and I was undefeated, because I've offered a 53-man roster spot, I would be awarded Richie James Jr. because I've awarded a 53-man roster spot. Now, let's just say, and I'm gonna delete these answers anyway before we actually get going. So this is just gonna be this is kind of a play around session, but I want to show you guys what we're doing behind the scenes so you have an idea of what we're going to be going through. So let's say just these 2 players put a claim in on Richie James Jr. Well, we will then have, which actually I'm going to kind of create it on the fly, waiver claim list. Okay, and we're going to have teams from 1 to 32, and we're going to have their records side by side. And what's going to happen is we're going to look down that list, and the higher you are on this list, which means the less win, basically the higher teams will have less wins. So let's say I'm just going to generate a fake list real quick. Browns and Saints. Let's say the Browns are 1-6 and the Saints are 2-5, just as an example. Okay, we're going to take that record and we're going to look at it and we're going to organize it. So let's just say, well, I won't organize it now, but we'll have it organized on our end where the top records will be at the bottom. So the higher win-loss records will be at the bottom. In fact, let's do 5-2 just to make it really different. All right, so 5-2 will be well down on the priority list. Obviously, with only 2 teams here in this makeup list, you can kind of get an idea. The Browns are 1-6. So what we'll do, the roster guru and myself, or the roster gurus and myself, will take a look-see. Well, That's why I don't want to look at this. So we'll take a look at this response list, and we'll say Saints and Browns. Okay, so we'll look for the Saints and the Browns, and we'll organize this by player name. So therefore, we'll be looking at all the claims for a particular player one at a time, and we're going to go in timestamp order. Okay, what that means for you is if you put in another claim, let's say, I'm just going to generate a fake entry real quick. Let's just say 14 o'clock and 51 seconds. 68 overall or above. And let's say it's the Browns again. And let's say they put in for, let me just pull up a player here. We'll put in DJ Swearinger Sr. So it's going to be free safety, strong safety, DJ Swearinger Sr., 53-man roster. And let's say the Saints, 1401, 51, 68 overall or above. Now, keep in mind I'm hand typing these. These will be all generated through the form. So when you guys submit the form, we won't have to hand type this stuff. It'll all be generated for us. But for the purposes of this little tutorial demonstration, I want to show you what all we'll be looking at behind the scenes. So we have two teams claiming for two different players, and the first one is Richie James Jr. So we're going to analyze this first, and we're going to look at the waiver claim list. Now, obviously, there's not just two teams, but for the purposes of the demonstration, we see the Browns are 1-6. We see the Saints are 5-2. So what we'll do is we'll go back to this tab, and the roster guru or myself will announce in the waiver wire area this player, Richie James Jr., was won by the Browns based on waiver claim priority. Okay, so the Browns will win Richie James Jr., but once you win a player for the week, you automatically go down to the bottom of the list, even if your record is worse than the people at the bottom, because once you win a claim for that week, you move down in waiver priority to the bottom of the list, so that way the good teams have a chance to usurp you on future picks. So then we would analyze the second free agent, which for this is DJ Swearinger Sr., and we see Browns and Saints. So the same two teams went for this player as well. Now we go back to the waiver claim list, and this time, even though the Saints are 5-2, right now they are a higher waiver claim priority because the Browns won their first player. Now, once the Saints win DJ Swearinger, they would then go to the bottom of the list, at the very bottom below the Browns, and all the other 30 teams above them would have waiver claim priority over the Browns and Saints. Okay, and if the Browns and Saints fought for a third player, and we're the only two teams to fight for that player, the Browns would win that third player because they are once again above the Saints in waiver claim priority. So I hope that kind of explains what we'll be doing, and we will be compiling this list, the one I'm kind of showing you with just these two teams. This is something we will have to compile on a week-to-week basis by hand. Neon Sports is really nice for a lot of things, but at this point, without playing with it much further, I haven't found a way to generate this list for us automatically. If I do, that'll be awesome, and it'll make our time a lot easier to use. But until then, we're going to be hand making it. So be aware that it's going to be a time-consuming process from the time you put in claims to the time they're awarded, because we're having to look at that waiver claim process. We're having to move stuff around. So I want to let you know what we're doing behind the scenes. But as far as your job in this waiver claim process, and I'm going to close this stuff out, all you have to do is get this form and fill it out. That's all you have to do. After that, you will be notified whether or not you won a player, and if you were in a bid for a player and you didn't win, you will be told who won and why they won. Okay, that's what we're going to do when we announce waiver claims. Now, going back to the rules real quick, let me make sure I'm still looking at, okay, make sure you guys still see what I'm looking at. So practice squad players, that's what PS stands for here. Practice squad players are a little different. Practice squad players are technically the ownership of a team. So what that means is if they are 67 or less overall, which means you do not have to fill a waiver claim for them, there is still a process you need to go through. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kill Chrome for a second. I'm going to bring up Discord, and I'm going to bring up the waiver wire area. So what you'll need to do is you'll have to come to this area, this channel, waiver wire channel. And what you'll have to do is, let's say, just for an example, let's say that Richie James Jr., our example from the previous free agent stuff, let's say he's on a practice squad, just as an example, okay? What you have to do to claim a practice squad player is, let's say he's a member of the Browns, just to make it easy since that's the two teams we've been using throughout. You have to tag in this channel, you have to type in your team name, which for me is the Saints, wish to claim wide receiver Richie James Jr. off Browns practice squad. You'll type basically this sentence. What has to be in this sentence is the following: your team name, the player you wish to claim, including position, and what practice squad are you claiming off of. And then what you'll do is you'll tag WFL Roster Guru, and you will tag the name of the other team. Now, at this point, we don't have a Browns owner, so you would have to find the Browns owner in this example, but I'm going to just use @Browns just as an example. Okay, but you would tag the name of the owner. So let's just say, I've got a guy over here, La Migra. Let's say he's the owner of the Browns. You would tag him in that message, and that way he knows that somebody's going after his practice squad player. If you do that properly, now I'm going to erase that, and I'm going to spell that wrong. WFL Roster Guru @Browns, so that way I don't tag anybody unnecessarily. And this is what you'll type, and you'll hit enter. Now at that point, the player in question, the owner in question of that player, has 12 to 24 hours to respond to either this thread with something along the lines of, well, I can't respond to my own thread. So basically, if you're the Browns, you will have to come back and say, Browns will sign wide receiver Richie James Jr. Oh, if I could spell, Richie James Jr. to their 53-man roster at Winuvas. Okay? And you will tag, if you are the one that's having the practice squad player potentially stolen, you will have to tag the person who tried to steal and say, hey, I'm signing them to my 53-man roster, to let them know they cannot get that player. Okay, practice squad players are protected in WFL to a certain extent, but you do have a time frame to protect them. Okay, so you would basically at this point hit enter, and at this point now, as the Saints, I've been notified that the Browns wish to keep Richie James Jr., so I need to go look elsewhere for a practice squad player. However, let me delete that message. Boop. If the Browns wish to just not argue about the fact and just say, you know what, I'm not worried about it, the Browns can post, Browns allow Saints to sign wide receiver Richie James Jr. off PS. PS for practice squad. Okay, you can use PS for practice squad. All right, you can do this, and if you decide to allow that team to sign your practice squad player, you still have to tag the owner of the team. So in this case, I'd still have to tag Winuvas, which is, I know me, but just to explain the process. And at this point, I get a notification that says I can sign this player off the Browns practice squad. At some point, you will have to get with a member of leadership, if you're not a member of leadership, to have them turn on practice squad stealing, because it will be off in the franchise by default. If you need to take someone off the practice squad and they don't release them outright for you to sign them, you need to get with a member of leadership, have them turn on practice squad stealing. You sign the player, let that member of leadership know so they can turn that practice squad stealing back off. Okay? That's as simple as it gets as far as our practice squad goes. And again, you have to make sure whenever you go to claim someone off the practice squad that you type the name and position of the player and the team you are. You tag the roster guru. That's the important part. You also tag the team that you're stealing from. Okay, so you'll have to find out the owner of that team and make sure you tag them in that message. Then, as the person who's being stolen from, you have two options. You have the option A, which is to tell the team that's trying to steal that player you're signing them to the 53-man roster, in which case you have to sign them to the 53-man roster. Or you tell the player, or you tell the owner option B, which is I'm going to release the player for you to sign to your 53-man roster. And at that point, you take that player and you put him on your 53-man roster. Okay? If the owner of, let's say the Browns doesn't do either thing, let's say they don't post any response to it, it is going to be assumed that you let the player go without a fight. If you wish to keep them, you have to post. If you do not post, that is an assumed letting the player go. That player will be allowed to be signed off your practice squad. If you don't protest, it will be taken. That's why we give that 12 to 24 hour room, that wiggle room, for you to basically oppose someone stealing off your practice squad. And just to let you know, you have to take and put them on the 53-man roster, and you can try and sneak them back to the practice squad. But anytime they are claimed, you say you're going to protect them, they have to go to your 53-man roster. They have to go there, okay? And we're not at this time, we're not making you keep them there. So if you want to be nitpicky about it, you can basically bounce guys back and forth. But at the same time, we want to make sure that you are being active with your roster, and you are understanding that there are consequences to you not answering requests for practice squad players to be claimed by other teams, okay? So if you don't answer a claim, it is assumed that you're letting that player go, okay? And that's the way our waiver wire process works. Let me see if there's anything else I need to cover. I don't think there is. I think for once I actually got everything right, so good. All right, so that should cover our waiver wire process in general. Oh, I'm looking at stuff on my computer. Hopefully that kind of clears things up as far as the process goes. Again, if you have any questions about anything we have going on in WFL, please feel free to ask a member of league leadership or myself. We will be glad to talk you through the process, or show you these videos, or get you to these videos so you can kind of see what we mean by our different processes. I hope that cleared some things up about our waiver wire process and what we're going to be doing behind the scenes, so you can kind of see what work we're doing to make sure this league flows smoothly. Hopefully that's kind of a little peek behind the curtains, if you will. Hopefully you appreciate this video. Hopefully you got something out of it. As always, I am Winuvas, the commissioner of the WFL and one of the coaches. I appreciate your time today, and until next time, guys, I will catch you later.